Thank you for listening to The Luminous Mind, episode 79.
Again, I think it was back in the 80s, the physics teacher, a colleague when I was teaching chemistry, he was doing physics, he actually put a comment in my guest book that it was nice to see that I was blurring the boundaries between teaching and entertaining.
Benjamin Franklin once said, "Do not curse the darkness, rather light a candle instead." If you're ready to set your mind on fire, then prepare yourself for the Luminous Mind with your host, Rebecca Bowman.
Today's fire starter is Jim Baker. Jim is a Maverick from the UK. He's a very decorated educator, receiving awards from 2015 all the way to 2009. He's been a chemistry teacher at Lincoln Christ Hospital School. During that time, in 1997, he reached the final 13 as the Salters Chemistry Teacher of the Year Award. And in his pendulum year of teaching in 2007, he was awarded the Lifetime Achievement Award. Upon retiring from the deputy head of science in charge of behavioral management, in the 1990s, his school was at the forefront of teaching training in the schools, and he was the chief mentor and liaison officer with Sheffield Hallam University. After coaching other staff to take on that role, he became involved in mentoring NQTs in science. So he's been the science master at Lincoln Schools. He mentors teachers. He does a lot of online education resources for that teaching. So welcome, Jim.
Thank you.
Did I explain you very well?
That was good. Thank you.
Okay, it's hard to take such a decorated teacher and condense it. So why don't you go ahead and just tell more about yourself to our audience?
Well, when I retired in 2008, I thought that would be it. But in 2009, I was asked to be a mentor on the Starting Out scheme. Because 50% of maths and science teachers pack up within 3 years, then the government set up a scheme whereby experienced teachers acted as online mentors for newly qualified teachers. After doing that, I did some teacher training. Because my ideas were liked by a school in Cyprus, I was asked to go out to Cyprus and give some coaching to their staff, and their school now have taken on board this flipped learning and Twigicut. I've made some videos for Fuse School, and I am a contributory author to Teaching Secondary Science, a book which is out in June.
Great. Some of our audio cut out, so I'm hoping that we got everything that you were talking about. But you've had 44 years of teaching experience. Do you want to kind of go through, what your personal educational experience was and how your philosophies kind of changed over time and with your experience?
Well, I started teaching in 1970, and they were the days before school inspections, when teachers had autonomy and teaching was fun. Since then, it has become more and more government-led, government-based, more inspections. So now, instead of the teacher focusing on the students and the head of department focusing on the teachers in that department and the head focusing on the heads of department, it's now turned around that the teacher is focusing on the heads of department who's coming round, checking them, and the heads of department focusing on the leadership group who are coming round to check them, and the heads of the school focused on the inspectors. So everything's the wrong way round.
You're more worried about trying to keep your job necessarily than teach your students. Is that what you're kind of saying?
Yes, and they just focus on the wrong things. This is why so many teachers are leaving the profession. And as I've said in my blog, if I were the CEO of a business that lost 50% of its employees within 3 years, I would seriously start to look at my policies. Therefore, I think the government seriously needs to look at its policies.
Top-down education is not helping, right?
Not at all.
So how has your paradigm or your educational philosophy changed over time and with experience?
I don't know as it's changed. It's got more and more possibly student-focused, because when I started teaching, the internet wasn't there, so you had to give more information. But now with the rise of the internet and the World Wide Web, that information is available. Therefore, less and less time needs to be taken up in the classroom with giving information, because the students can now access this themselves. So this allows me more and more time in the classroom helping the students to make sense of the information they've read. And also, they do their questions, which they normally do at home, they actually do them in class, so that I'm there to help them. And this is the basis of the flipped learning.
Well, and it sounds like you're kind of at the forefront of flipped learning and the flipped classroom, where I'm going to kind of briefly explain to our listeners, then maybe you can, correct any information that I've given, but you basically give the lecture online to the student. The student is supposed to come prepared, listen to the lecture, read the material or whatever, and then you're there as a resource to help answer those questions. Is that how you would define flipped learning?
Essentially it, but the resource isn't just me giving the lecture, it's actually, there's written notes, there's animations, there are videos. For each topic, there are a range of resources to cater for the different types of learner. So one learner may prefer to watch a video, somebody may prefer to read notes about it, but that's all catered for because all these different resources are on Twidget, which the students access prior to the lesson. And in fact, they have the whole year's course from day one.
So they can move ahead and maybe work at their own pace, and then you're there, like I said, as a resource to help them wherever they struggle.
Exactly.
As a chemistry teacher and some of those sciences, do you do some of the lab stuff with them live, or do you find it more useful to do that online?
No, I mean, the lab stuff really has to be done in the lab, where they're actually handling the chemicals and getting familiar with the apparatus.
So the teaching is, you find that's excellently handled in an online setting, but then, of course, we need the labs to be able to apply application to the learning.
Yes.
So, great. What's the best advice that you've ever received with being a teacher?
I don't know. I mean,
sounds like you're the one giving the advice.
A lot of advice I tend not to heed, because a lot of, even on student teachers that I've mentored, when they've gone into schools, people in that school have actually told them, you don't smile until Christmas, otherwise the students will think you're easy game. And so I suppose my advice that I give and how I do things is based on my 44 years experience, not on textbooks or what others say.
Yeah, well, and we talked about in our other audio that we've discussed that sometimes with that advice of not smiling, you become an unapproachable teacher, and then students don't come to you to understand the material better, right?
Exactly. When I mentored new teachers, what I told them was the thing that underpins all good teaching is relationships. And if you can't get a good relationship with the students, no matter how well you can explain your material, if the students do not wish to listen or aren't interested, then it's a waste. So first of all, you must have the attention of the class. And the way to do that is to have fun, have a joke, and be approachable.
Yeah. Don't you find that when the students generally like you or feel connected to you, they're going to listen to you better?
Exactly.
So that's great. So what do you think about socialization activities in school? I mean, we always hear that's the reason how come, kids need to go to formal schooling is socialization. What is your thoughts on that?
It is. They must be able to interact, which they will at school, but a lot of the learning can be done out of the school. They are in the room with the computer. They haven't got the distractions that they may have in a classroom.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
they can possibly learn in 30 minutes what they would learn in an hour at school.
Well, and that was where I struggled as a kid, is with all the distractions around. Sometimes I had a hard time learning because I wanted to be interacting with my peers, not learning whatever the professor was teaching. So
yeah, and also the beauty of this flipped idea is that if a student doesn't understand something on a video or something on some notes, they can replay the video, reread the notes as many times as is necessary until they understand it. But when they're listening to a lecture from a teacher, they cannot keep telling the teacher to stop and repeat.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I always found, too, that when the lecture was over, there was very little time to ask questions, of what we didn't understand. Because I grew up in an era before the flipped classroom, so if we had questions, we had to spend our time at home trying to figure out what the teacher had meant. So you see advantages that way as well?
And it's no questions that the teacher should be answering, i.e. the teacher should be answering the questions that the students come up with, not the teacher saying, you're going to answer my questions because I know the answers. It's completely the wrong way of doing it.
Oh, I love that idea. So you're more concerned about the questions that the students has versus them answering your questions correctly.
Yes, obviously they will pass exam papers ready for when they do the final exam, but this is the way it should be. And also they are more engaged if they feel that I'm answering their questions rather than, why is he asking me this question?
That's great.
Way back in the early 1980s, before the World Wide Web, I would still work this way, but then I had to give the students essentially handwritten notes that I'd written prior to the lesson. So I was actually working that way in the 1980s, even before this flipped classroom had been coined.
So you understood it long before.
Yes.
It
just seemed crazy just standing there giving information when they could read that.
Exactly.
And the valuable 1 hour lesson time should be spent me helping the students to get their head around the word, not just giving them the word.
Exactly. So we talked about the top-down learning and how that's affecting our education system. What other obstacles do you feel are in the way of teachers?
The priorities, the infrastructure to keep is a lot of schools will be boasting that they've got a room of computers and all this, that, and the other, but they've not got the infrastructure to maintain it. So in schools, virtually every day, there's at least one class where the computers don't work, there's not enough bandwidth. So the money must be spent on the infrastructure to keep the computers all going.
So we talked about, too, I think in our other, when I discussed with you the other day, that you feel like some of our computer technical people are underpaid and underutilized.
Yes, they are underpaid. That a typical IT technician in a school that's possibly one of the most important people in the school is paid under half what a newly qualified teacher is paid. Because, again, it's all part and parcel of this subject or this discipline is worth more than that one. Hence all this standardized testing that if you're doing maths, these subjects are more important than, say, art or woodwork. And that was the picture I put on the blog site on Google Plus that I've had a lot of comments about, whereby the guy is saying, right, you're all going to do this test. We're going to see how quickly you can climb this tree.
Exactly.
And in front of him is the goldfish, etc. And it's silly.
Well, another question that I have for you is, I've been talking with another contributor named Steve Horwich, and he said that the way that we qualify teachers is if they have an education degree. He seems to think that it just doesn't benefit our school system when we don't have teachers that are passionate about a subject. And we kind of discussed that, of how you go into mentor and you're a wonderful scientist and chemist and all this stuff. You're basically mentoring these teachers that don't have any experience. and within 3 years, they're the department head. What is your feeling about that? Should we be doing a general education for qualified teachers and then specialize, or should we find specialized people and ask them to teach?
I think certainly for subjects where there are like maths, physics, chemistry, where things are right or wrong, then you need the specialized teacher, particularly with this flipped learning idea, because if a student asks a question that's probably not in the book, then you need the specialist there to be able to call on his prior knowledge to answer that question. And I've seen a lot of teachers that just read up the lesson before the lesson, being asked a question by a member of the class and the teacher not being able to answer it, and then this leads to discipline problems because the students lose confidence in that member of staff, and then this is when the discipline problems start.
Before we go on, let us take a minute and hear about our sponsors. Changing a paradigm takes some study, but like me, you are probably super busy. That's why we've teamed up with Audible. Go to our website, theluminousmind.net, get a free month of Audible with 2 audiobooks, thousands of titles in exchange for only books that you absolutely love. You too can be learning on the go to keep that fire burning. Welcome back to The Luminous Mind with Jim Baker, a Maverick teacher. Well, and we also, I think in our last discussion, we kind of talked about how when we require like every student having to take chemistry, regardless of if they actually enjoy it, it's just a requirement, that we end up in a situation where we're just throwing whoever we possibly can into that seat to fill the spot. Do you feel like that's a problem too?
Yes, when I started, there was obviously English and maths. You have to do English and maths, a science, a language. But now you have to do all 3 sciences because presumably they are valued more highly than, say, woodwork or dance. And not everybody is gifted in that way. So the person that gets a lot of qualifications because their aptitude is for the subjects that are compulsory, and the poor students that's really gifted in perhaps music, woodwork, in the art subjects, they don't get so many qualifications because the subjects that they're good at are not the compulsory ones.
Yeah, exactly. And by making everybody take it, we're not helping that everyone have a better knowledge of science or whatever, because we have to just fill the spot. We don't have really great qualified teachers in those areas.
I know, unless a teacher has got that subject knowledge and is passionate about it, then the students will not learn.
Yeah.
And also they will not behave as well. If they can see a teacher is passionate about a subject, it's something that the students sense. And if they can sense that, then the discipline problems dissolve away.
Yeah, that's true.
Actually posted on Twitter that apparently the government are thinking now that students that do not do well in the SATs, then they have to repeat them, which is just adding insult to injury. And again, the SATs are just on the English and maths and science. Now, so the poor old students that's good at the subjects that aren't tested is possibly having to redo them, and it's just adding insult to injury and just knocking the confidence.
When they don't even enjoy it in the first place, right?
No, so I'm actually against that.
Yeah.
I've actually thought that the government should actually take note of, the picture where there's the fish and the monkey and they've all got to do the same task.
Yeah, exactly. So let's kind of shift in more of a positive way. What successes have you seen with the style of teaching? And we talked about how you've basically been doing the flipped classroom back before it was even popular back in the 80s. What success have you seen with that approach?
Well, back in 1998, I had 14 chemistry students, and we essentially did this then, that I told them that they would choose what homework they did because only they knew what they needed to spend time on. And for me to give them all the same work was ridiculous, because why should somebody be spending time? So when I tried this, and in 2000, out of the 14 chemists, 8 got grade A, 3 got grade B, and 3 got grade C, and a pass was an E.
Well, did you find that when you flipped it around and you said, well, what questions do you want to study, did you find that they actually came through? They didn't just numb out, that they actually came through and came forward with great ideas and stuff like that? Or did you still have to push in some way?
No, because they are more enthusiastic and more likely to do work that they've chosen because they see it as a need that they need. Whereas if the teacher says to everybody, you're all going to do this, the ones that think, well, why should I be doing this? I can already do this. But they have to do it because if they don't hand something in, they won't get a tick in the teacher's mark book. And it's just a continually downward spiral. Whereas if they can get some ownership for the work, then they got this feeling that, oh, I'm in charge of my learning. I can see the sense of doing this. So that's why I'm going to do it.
So basically what you're saying is it helps kids find the application for their learning more quickly. Is that, yeah.
If they're going to do something, if they can see the sense in doing that, and in order for that to happen, they must have the autonomy to be able to choose. Hence, on Twidgicate, the idea of giving, the brighter student may want to read the notes on a topic, whereas the less able student may access that work a lot better by watching an animation or a video.
Exactly. That is great. So I wish that we had all teachers like you. So tell us some personal habits that help make you successful.
Personal what, sorry?
I said I wish we had more teachers like you. So tell us some personal habits that help to make you successful.
Personal habits?
Yeah.
I think it's just always smiling. I always tell the students that every time you smile, it adds a minute to your life.
So really just being happy is your personal habit.
Yes, because if you're happy, the class is happy.
That is great. We kind of discussed some of the things that you're doing last time when we talked that you're most excited about, but you want to reiterate those things? What are you doing with your students right now that you're most excited about?
I think it's getting them to take on board this flipped idea, the fact that they can email me at night. If they're stuck with anything, they can email me. I can get back to them, and all the stuff on Twidgicate, which is all there, so they can actually read ahead. I'm now looking forward to doing more and more tuition online, because on private tuition, I can be spending over 2 hours traveling for an hour's tuition, which is silly. So I'm subscribed to, I don't know if you're familiar with WizIQ.
WizIQ? I'm actually not.
It's essentially a virtual classroom. I've just watched a video on it today, and it's fantastic. You've got a whiteboard there. You can have as many in your class. You can actually separate your class and give each class a different whiteboard with different material on. So I've just now purchased it's not arrived yet, a digital tablet, which I can just plug into the computer. So it's just like writing on paper, which is really valuable for somebody doing something like chemistry, where you're writing equations, which you can't do on the keyboard.
Oh, that's great. So do you ever foresee a time when teaching is pulled away from the state, where a teacher can be kind of like an independent entrepreneur? Do you see that as a possibility for teaching, or what's your opinions on that?
I know children can be home taught now, and it's the fastest growing in the UK like tuition because of the way the state system works. Even bright students come out of a lesson not understanding it, because it's just essentially been death by PowerPoint. The teachers stood at the front there, put a load of PowerPoint slides on, rush through them. There's no time for the students to ask questions when it's on, and then at the end of the lesson, they've not understood it. And that's why they employ people like me to do private tuition to make sense of what they've done in class.
So they have to reteach the students after they've been taught, basically. You reteach them.
Yes, because most of the students that I'm doing private tuition for are from top schools.
So you come in and teach, but then you also offer a private tuition type, if somebody wants to access you.
No, I don't do private tuition. I mean, I teach now only one day. Well, I like to call it entertaining, 1 day a week. And I've only got 2 students in one class and 1 in the other. But the private tuition I do is for students from other schools.
I love how you talk about teaching as entertaining, because I've actually heard teachers say, well, I'm not here to entertain you. What's your opinion on that? I mean, you obviously don't agree.
That's basic. If you're gay, then you've got their attention. And way back in a physics when I was a kid.
Oh, you're cutting out. Oh, no.
Is that any better?
Okay, yeah. Do you want to start over? Sorry.
Yes, when, again, I think it was back in the 80s, the physics teacher, a colleague, when I was teaching chemistry, he was doing physics, he actually put a comment in my guest book that it was nice to see that I was blurring the boundaries between teaching and entertaining.
That's funny.
Blurring the boundaries, yes.
So do you want to tell us some of your long-term goals? We've talked about some of the internet sites that you're going to start using, but what are some of your long-term goals?
Well, I'd like to see flipped learning being the norm in all schools, and also teachers not being under this pressure. As I said, apparently the life expectancy of a teacher that's actually in the classroom until they're 60 is 3 years.
Wow.
And I've known 2 teachers who have died within a year of retiring at 60.
Wow.
And it's just because of the pressure, the unnecessary pressure.
So if you could ever become the head of state, what would you do? Fire yourself?
I'd go back to how it was in the 70s, where the teachers were given autonomy, and I'd like to see homework as we know it abolished and put in its place preparation for the next lesson.
Exactly. So what advice or encouragement would you give to teachers and parents that are just starting out? I mean, it sounds pretty bleak that we have a top-down type education. What would you suggest to them to do if they want to be a teacher?
It is bleak. What's criminal about it's actually the good, conscientious teachers. They're the ones that are leaving, because they're the ones that try and meet all these inaccessible targets and worry if they cannot, and so leave because of stress.
Yeah.
Whereas I'm in the fortunate position in that I don't need to go into school, but the only reason I go into this school and teach or entertain 1 day a week is that the head gives me complete freedom, which he does. I just wish that all the other staff were given the same freedom as I've been given.
Oh, I wish we could turn the education thoughts upside down so that we could return it. I mean, it's only doing our own children a disservice. So.
It is I feel that I regard our schools as a chemical factory, and the children are the byproducts of that process, because all that matters is statistics. If the school can meet the targets set by the inspectors, it doesn't matter about the children.
Yeah, and that's scary when we get that way.
And the children can sense this. The children sense that the teachers have been up till about 2 o'clock in the morning, unnecessarily marking books, arriving at the lesson bleary-eyed, not smiling, and the body language just reflects on every student in that class.
Well, and maybe they take out their frustrations of their job on the students themselves.
Exactly, yes.
That's too bad. So, do you have a favorite book or resource that you'd like to share to maybe help teachers get going with maybe creating flipped classrooms or maybe an independent education site themselves?
This new book that's out is called Teaching Secondary Science. There are 4 authors. It's the 4th edition. I was asked if I'd do a chapter in this 4th edition on using computers and the web, and in there it's all about Twidget and Flipped Classroom. It is a really excellent book because it's teaching science teachers to educate students to look after the planet as well. Very environmentally friendly, and it also explains a lot of misconceptions.
Yeah, some of our new technology, like you said, if we're really concerned about environmental issues, let's move towards more innovative techniques.
Yes. And in this book, it's actually recommending teachers to actually this to the students, i.e. to look after this. And this is why I feel it puts this book apart from all others.
Yeah.
And it's as well as a hard copy, it's coming out as an e-book as well.
Save on the paper on the trees.
Yes.
So, great. So, what legacy would you like to leave? If you could leave a legacy, what would it be?
Just the people I've taught, and hopefully help if I can pass my ideas to 3 teachers and they can pass those to I don't know how many students. I live in Lincoln and I must have taught half the population of Lincoln who was teaching 44 years.
Wow. That's great. So before we say goodbye, can you give us some final parting words of advice or maybe a favorite quote that you'd like to share? And then let us know how we can get in touch with you.
So on the bottom of my emails is smile, live longer and make someone's day.
I love that.
But yes, you've got the website there. I don't know if that will be available on the podcast.
Yes.
That's my email.
I'll find it and add it to the show notes. So
I've put the mobile number there, my Skype address, and the web address.
Okay. I'll add those to the show notes for you. So your final advice is smile and live longer and make someone's day. Did I get that correct? Great. I appreciate you taking a second day with me to talk about education. Like I said, I wish we had millions of other teachers like you that had this philosophy, and wish we could get the headmasters and the top bureaucrats that are making all these decisions to actually listen to people like you. So
they will not like to, I suppose, argue because they haven't actually been on the front line for this length of time. And until you've actually been on the front line doing it, you can't say, and as I've said in post, that these people in government and these inspectors that make these rules, they would not survive a month in the classroom if they had to abide by those rules.
By their own rules. Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
No, I'd say I'm just so grateful that there are things like yourself, these podcasts, that enable me to spread the word worldwide.
Yeah, you've got some incredible resources, so I definitely encourage our audience to check you out.
All right, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for listening to The Luminous Mind. To learn more about Jim Baker and to get his contact information, go to our show notes at theluminousmind.net. Also, be sure to become a subscriber to our free email list so you can receive notifications for our weekly audio blog, The Spark. We would love to have you join our program. Do so by going to the scheduling tab and become a fire starter today. Help support the podcast by making all your Amazon purchases through the free Amazon widget on our website, theluminousmind.net. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Google+. Get our audio content on YouTube, iTunes, and Stitcher. Leave us a review. Tell us how we can help you so together we can continue to light minds on fire and change the paradigm of education.